Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today are Wendy Bronfein and Rebecca Bronfein-Raphael with Curio Wellness. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having us. Hi.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Wendy, I'll start with you. I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background. So what was it that brought you to cannabis?
So I had learned that Maryland, where I'm originally from and where I live now, was going to be bringing on a medical cannabis program. And that sort of sparked the conversation with our father. We're sisters, Rebecca and I, and began a due diligence process that led us to applying in the license round that started in 2015. My background was in television. I did on-air marketing for TV networks and had started before that in original productions. And our father was in the healthcare sector in pharmaceutical distribution. So he had this healthcare regulatory background. I had a branding and marketing background, and sort of bringing those two things together in the idea of this cannabis program beginning here in Maryland. I tried cannabis for the first time when I was in high school and had used it at any point in my life from then and from that point to this point. And so it also was an area where it was like, okay, I know the product. You ideally, anyway, you're a good marketer, you can market anything, but you usually like to market something that you like. So I like the idea of being able to build a brand and be able to market this category to people.
Rebecca, was the start similar for you? And what were those first few days at Curio like?
My introduction or joining the company was quite different. So my background was in fine art sales. So I worked in art galleries in New York City. I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. And prior to Curio, I ran the collector relations team for a website called artsy.net. So I had no background in a regulatory environment, nothing pharmaceutical, nothing scientific. And frankly, the art world is like the polar opposite of what we deal in now, where it's the wild, wild west because nobody's really paying attention and things are bought and sold for whatever we please. So I have always been in sales, and we were at a turning point in Maryland where we went from having overnight about 30 customers to north of 60. And so Michael, our CEO, called me and said, I know you can sell art, but do you think you can sell an eighth? And I said, well, there's really only one way to find out. But I had been working with Wendy while I was on maternity leave with my third child and kind of helping by being her marketing intern. And we had a great time. It was a real natural working dynamic because we've known each other all our lives and we talk multiple times a day. So he said, I'll give you a shot at being our sales director, but you really should leave your company on good terms because if you don't hit the numbers, you got to go back there in 90 days. And thankfully, it's been 6+ years and I haven't had to go find another job. So I'm hopeful it's going to continue to work out. But I was really never an avid cannabis user. I'm not a big drinker either. I just am the black sheep of the family in terms of my tolerance. But to Wendy's point, from the products we've developed over the years, and now that we're in an adult use market in Maryland and Missouri, and I can purchase basically whatever I'd like, I find that our effects-based or our wellness-driven products that help you sleep or help you focus are really incredible because as a working mom, I can still do my day-to-day activities and I don't really feel high. I just feel better and I enjoy my interactions with people. So through understanding the science, appreciating how we make products differently, I've become more of an avid cannabis user.
Wendy, has the idea always been to look at cannabis more like a pharmaceutical company or more like a typical cannabis operator?
I think it's always been taking the active ingredients of cannabis and using them to make products that improve quality of life. so that it's not as basic as I think of what people expect when you think about cannabis. I mean, we have great flower that turns into great vapes, but and in sort of its most basic form. But it's really where the game changes is on the processor side, right? Where like you're extracting the oil and then we're making something that does exactly what it says it's supposed to. And because we started in medical, that was very much rooted in like if people were getting recommendations for doctors and they were using it, doctors typically understood when like a drug was created, whether it's over the counter prescription, like this is the drug, this is its purpose, and there's trial and there's data that says it will get rid of that headache, it will fix your tummy ache, whatever it is. And so, but cannabis was very generic, right? And because of the endocannabinoid system, it was like we could be buying the same thing for two different, completely to like muscle spasms and nausea, like not related at all. Those are two different things in Walgreens. So we wanted to try and make it more normal by being able to create things where like, however you wanted your effects to be or the symptoms you wanted to treat were we've formulated to do that, and then we've put it in some sort of dosage form that's ideal for how you want to consume. So do you want to rub it on your body? Do you want to chew it up? Does it dissolve in your mouth? Do you want to smoke it? However that works, we're putting the solution in the form that best fits what you want to do and also best fits how it's going to work for you. So like the sleep product that we created is the most innovative. It's actually a pill that you swallow that has a pulse in it. But that was specific because the problem when we talked to patients was falling and staying asleep. A lot of people would vape, but vape will get you asleep, but it's not going to last a long time. So then you wake up and now you're doing it again. So there's a magic in kind of what form you're taking to how long you want your results to last.
So did Curio start as a manufacturer first and then become vertically integrated?
No, we started in Maryland with all three licenses. So a cultivator, a processor, and a retailer. But Maryland is a wholesale state. So while we had our own store, we also sold to nearly every dispensary across the state. Since then, we've added more retail to our portfolio and then continue to sell to all the other dispensary partners as well.
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
And in Missouri, we grow and manufacture. So we are a wholesale partner to the 100+ dispensaries in that state as well.
Well, and I do want to get into the big expansion into Missouri. But sorry, just one more question about starting in Maryland. Do you think it was easier to start with all three at once rather than focusing on one and growing? Was it kind of just like, all right, let's just go for everything?
Well, one, cultivation well supports processing, right? Because you need the material. But I think it was natural for us because we knew we wanted to make processed products, but we also knew that we wanted to be differentiated in flower, not just from the perspective of the person who's consuming through smoking, but also because it's sort of, the intel inside, if you will, right? So the higher quality flower that we're growing in these very hygienic environments to the standards we built, and we can capture a lot of data and really optimize how well we can grow the flower, makes a better raw material that is used to get you that process, right? Because it's our flower that we extract to then get the oil that makes all these products. So that whole lineage becomes stronger.
When you were starting, what kind of equipment did you bring in-house that you couldn't live without? And was there a bit of trial and error when it came to the equipment?
So our equipment, particularly with respect to automation, has evolved over time through one, there being more resources to do, us getting more space to be able to use things. In terms of our cultivation and the infrastructure of it, we had what we would refer to as a state-of-the-art system from the beginning. So we were always using specifically an Argus industrial horticulture system. We have chillers that run our HVAC. So all of that was built to a very specific specification to facilitate the grow in the whole building. But like when you get to the end of the process, when we started, I mean, we were hand packed with our scales calibrated to meet the state standards, all that stuff. When we grew in manufacturing, had to migrate to a new location, it gave us more space, and thus we were able to bring in flower packaging machinery and labeling. So over time, as the program grew as we grew, more automation has come into play. But as many people in this industry know, we still strike that balance between kind of traditional automation that is available to us and those businesses that will work with us, and then sort of like the automation that has been made just for us because we have a unique need and or because traditional spaces don't work with us.
So, Rebecca, you had mentioned the new facility, talking about the new facility in Missouri. It's in Maryland Heights, right?
Correct. Yes.
So how did you guys pick the location, and what was it like ramping up operations in Missouri?
So the location was fortuitous because it's in an industrial park area, but it's also very close to the St. Louis airport, which is very near to the city. So we always want to have a manufacturing facility or a grow facility that's as near to a bolus of our customers as possible, because one of our tenets is that we want to make it easy to do business with us. So we can offer things like next day delivery or multiple deliveries a week because of our proximity to the St. Louis metropolitan area. Starting up that facility was had its benefits and its challenges. The benefits of being the second location that you stand up, and I'm sure most of your listeners are aware that in cannabis, because every state is different and you can't take everything over state lines, you basically have to erect a carbon copy of what you have in one state. You've got to, build the same thing somewhere else. So we basically took the best lessons learned from the Maryland facility and brought them together to build, design, build, and implement practices in Maryland Heights in Missouri. Some of the challenges that we experience are both specific to the regulatory body and how they run approvals, but also strange things like we went to make our edibles and we didn't account for the fact that the pH in the water in Missouri was going to be different than the pH in Maryland, which was a real important learning for us because we endeavor to go other places. But under our cGMP guidelines, which are the current good manufacturing practices that the FDA requires like a standard manufacturer to follow, it created one more set of checks and balances that whenever we go somewhere new, we now know that we have to look at the pH of the water. There are other things specific to where the new state you're going into, the new market, you have to be prepared for this. And it's all running really smoothly in Missouri now, but there were definitely moments of like, oh my goodness, I would never have thought of that. And it makes so much sense in retrospect. So we're glad we had the learning, but in the moment we were like, oh my God, what do we do here? So we have a really talented group of individuals called our product innovation team, which work closely with a scientific advisory board that Wendy and Michael established at the founding of the company, that we were going to have this group of scientists, chemists, pharmacologists, doctors kind of lead our product innovation efforts. And they work in tandem with a group of colleagues who, when challenges like those of the pH example arise, they go to the new market, they investigate, they figure out the solutions, and then they work in tandem with our ops and quality teams to make sure that the solutions that they come up with are repeatable and sustainable for whichever market we're in.
Why did you guys choose cGMP certification? Just given the regulatory landscape, it's not necessary. So why'd you make the choice?
So we operate through a lens that we believe cannabis should be descheduled and it should live under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, seen akin to a dietary supplement. And in that space, a GMP certification is a higher standard of your rigor towards manufacturing. In the supply chain you use, the training that your team has, the SOPs that are in place, and kind of just overall putting quality on a pedestal in terms of what you deliver. And so everything we've done since the beginning has sort of been through this assumption that at a date in the future, we will be federally different than where we are today, and we should be ready for that. We should not be changing what we do to align with it. And so this was an investment that we had made We started to work on that alignment in 2018 and we're officially certified in 2019. And then obviously having built out Missouri are now certified there as well. In our cultivation, this year we became GACP certified, which is essentially the agricultural equivalent of a GMP. So, the state requires a lot of you in any market, but I think most people in the space would probably agree that most of that is much more through the lens of fears of making a legal choice and concerns around diversion, and really not always through the lens of how do you create best in class like manufacturing and products. And that's kind of the lens we look through things.
I also add to that from a consumer's perspective, like the person who goes into the store, we put a cGMP emblem on all of our products because we want people to trust the Curio brand. And so cGMP becomes this way that our team members, because in the spirit of equipment, there's only so much you can automate in this industry. Like at some point, someone is going to have to touch a plant. It's really keeps us honest, and it keeps the processes to a level that if we aren't making something that meets the specifications, there's no ambiguity around whether or not it can go out to the end consumer. So when you're making a product that's supposed to help you sleep or help you focus, or we're talking about some of our best strains that have a reputation for having high terpenes, if those end products get tested and they don't meet the specifications that we've set for them, then we won't bring them out to market for two reasons. One, integrity is really important to us, and we want to make sure that the products are the same every time, so that the consistency you rely upon in something you buy at Target, you can get that with something you buy at a dispensary. But also because we're asking for consumers to trust us and that our products will help them achieve a certain effect. And so if you get things into the market that have different cannabinoids or terpenes, then that experience is going to ebb and flow. And that's just not what we want for the people who buy our brand.
When you guys decided to go cGMP back in 2018, what changes did you have to make?
Some of it was supply chain stuff. So we had to validate all of our suppliers. I think where we had to change more was probably in that space, the validation of all of our suppliers, because you already have like that SOP rigor in place because of the state regulatory piece. So there may have been nuances relative to what GMP requires, but that discipline wasn't new to us. I think I remember a lot more being attenuated relative to, particularly because there's some products we make we have licensed partners. And so we are buying through typically vendors that they had brought to us to say, these are the ingredients where you get them. Now they needed to come through this lens of the GMP status. So if that supply chain didn't align, we had to rejigger things to make sure that we could be compliant and still make that product.
We also we also have a lot of people on staff who come from CPG or standard manufacturing backgrounds. So we're fortunate in the benefit of that decision was that as soon as they hit the ground running, they were already doing things to a cGMP standard. So it's kind of all we know in some ways. But to Wendy's point, it really tends to be the sourcing of ingredients and materials. And then little things like you can't have cardboard in your facility. So you've got to have processes for getting rid of that before it comes into your production areas.
As part of that rejiggering, did you lose any supply chain partners?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think in some cases, I think we forced them to go out and get certification for things that they already were doing, but they just never documented it. So that applies more so to people who are like really in the cannabis industry, and no other partner has said like, can I see this certification piece of paperwork? And so they went out and got it. But I don't recall anybody who we weren't able to continue working with.
So, okay. Well, that's good. That means that I guess that means that you did your due diligence up front,
Yeah.
So as you're looking to expand, you said that you have your eyes on a lot of markets. How did you pick Missouri as the next destination?
Missouri, so Missouri started with a medical program after Maryland had started, and we were initially interested then, but the nature of that process, it became clear that you really had to have residency and be like intrinsically tied to the state at that time, and so we didn't have a pathway through that application process. And then later, opportunity came where an existing licensee was looking for an operational partner. And that's how we came to be where we are today. But Missouri had a medical program because when we started this process, they were still medical, very similar to Maryland. They had started after us and had retained even more patients than we did. Their population, in going into adult use, their population size was very similar to Maryland. Their median income was a little bit lower, but we had about the same amount of adults, 21 plus. And so it became very relatable. It was also was a market that was well regarded. It has a very warm industry there. They have a very strong trade association. They are very well run, very professionalized, and very collegiate, which I don't know if it's like that in every state. So there was just a lot of pieces to that puzzle that were attractive. Now that you're adult use, there's a whole other element because Missouri touches 9 states and many of those don't have legal markets. So that has made them have a lot of business there that obviously wasn't present when it was medical. But we normally look at places through the quality. We start really with the quality of the program and the regulation. So like what product mix is available and how easy is it to do business? Because we are so constrained in so many ways. I mean, my sort of like aspirational line with regards to like the regulatory environment is, with the federal state conflict, we have a cloud over us, right, to start. And so when a state aspires to create something that's legal, they should only build the program through the lens of adding sunlight and not piling on more clouds, right? So for any state whose program looks strong enough to, make that investment and not burn up capital and actually be able to find a way to profitability, that's where we want to be. If there's too many licenses, if product mix isn't there, if the regulatory scheme is too rigorous, it's just not worth our time.
Is that partnership with VMO, is that the partner that you found in Missouri? How did that come together?
Did you say how to come together?
Yes.
So they were looking for a partner to operationalize. We had actually met and dated a little bit, I guess you could say, about a year before it all came to pass. And got to know them well in kind of round 1 and then again in round 2, and ultimately were able to strike a deal. And so we help them operationalize the license, build out this 130,000 square foot facility in Missouri where we'll do the cultivation and the manufacturing.
Okay. One thing I've heard from a couple of people that they prefer working in states that are medical first before they go rec. Do you have is that the same for you guys, or would you prefer to be in a medical only state?
Well, I think that the benefit of launching in a medical state, especially one where you can see a path to adult use, is that you have this moment in time where you can launch your products and speak to a consumer and really understand that segment and what they're looking for, so that when adult use does start, you kind of learn this is the temperature of this state, this is how its population thinks about cannabis. These are the need states that most people are using cannabis for. And that need state might be, I want to take the edge off on a Saturday night. Like universally, the recreational reason why we're all using it can be true for everyone. So the medical only platform allows us to kind of experiment, almost like building the plane while flying it a little bit. And so you have this time that you can really learn the landscape, bring your products to market, figure out which products in each market are going to work best for that state. And then by the time adult use comes, you've also had the benefit of time to ramp up your manufacturing and your cultivation operations, because meeting the demands of the consumers in the recreational market is incredibly important to retain brand loyalty and also to meet their expectations, which if you hit the ground running in rec, it can be very hard to achieve, the volumes that other established brands, for example, are putting out from day one. There's also in medical, there tends to be less price compression and less racing to the bottom. One thing that I really respect about Missouri is that as a group of operators, they've said we're not going to compete with each other and race for market share by really deeply discounting our products, like you've seen in places like Michigan or Massachusetts or Oklahoma, where it's very hard to be a successful business in those states because people are giving away all of their wholesale margin. And so that also is what's driving the selection of the states that we go in. To Wendy's point, how do the operators work together? Where does adult use fall on their runway or their roadmap? And how can we as a business set ourselves up for success between the time we would get there and the time when AU would come? And it may or may not be a good decision to go to that state based on those factors combined.
When it comes to the revenue splits in both Maryland and Missouri, what portion of the business is medical and what portion of the business is rec?
So in Missouri, everything is available, like all products, regardless of whether you hold a card or not, are available to all consumers. So there's really not this medical or adult use split. It's just about the amount of taxes that the end consumer pays. Whereas in Maryland, the medical program has limitations, or excuse me, the adult use program has limitations. So medical patients who still hold their card can buy any product they've ever been able to buy, whereas the recreational customer is limited in terms of their menu. Having said that, the dollars generated by the recreational customer are much larger than that of the medical customer. And some of that's because the medical program is not really advertised by the state at all anymore. And under our regulations, we are not allowed to advertise. So there's just this drop off of the medical customer, but it's really not in their best interest because a medical patient in Maryland doesn't have to pay any sales tax on their purchase, and they have an unlimited menu, and you get preferential treatment in terms of your service at the dispensary. So if you have been a medical patient or you're desirous of buying cannabis in Maryland, it actually benefits your selection and your bottom line, your own wallet, by joining the program. So as often and as much as we can, we still advocate for medical program participation in Maryland because it's really set up to benefit the end consumer more.
As revenue generators for the states and job providers, do you feel cannabis operators get the same respect as other manufacturers?
Absolutely not. I'll let Wendy speak to the job creation because I think she often says, it really gets overlooked, and it's such a huge thing. It's a huge part of what we do. So I won't steal her thunder, but I think it's an excellent talking point on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I had to laugh because I don't think we get it. I don't think we get any. I mean, I don't know if we get any respect really, but I mean, so we started operations like in terms of getting the license that meant you could start doing things was August of 2017. I think we had, I don't know, maybe 15-ish at most people at that time in Maryland. I think right now we're sitting close to 400, and then we expect to hire up to 150 in the first year in Missouri. These are living wage paying jobs with full competitive benefits package like you'd have at any mainstream company. And, a lot of on the job training and opportunities for professional development. And so I don't know. I don't think it's considered at all in terms of what you're doing for the local economy. And then if you think about like, well, we're one of those. I can't say everyone does it the same way, but if you're just one of those in terms of creation, you then have several more licenses on both in Maryland on the cultivation and the processing side, plus all the retailers, right? And any retail store has at least probably 20 to 30 people on their staff. So there's a ton of job creation that's happened in the last so many years. And no, I don't think it's considered at all. And in terms of, and what people never really think about is there's sort of a similarity between cannabis and like tech in the 90s where we came out of nowhere, right? And so for people who get into this space, there's also can be very accelerated movement, right? Because it's such high growth and there's so much need that you really can move forward in your career probably faster than if you were doing similar type work in the mainstream sector, because you would just be like, well, you do this and then there's that level and then you get promotion. This person's never going to leave. And that's not where we are. So it's a very dynamic space. With that's hiring thousands of people.
And the ancillary benefits as well. Like in Missouri, there are no restrictions on advertising. It's a really cannabis friendly state in that way. And so you can go there and see multiple sponsorships, multiple events taking place that are adjacent to normal community events like tailgates, farmers markets, all of this stuff. So it's very incredible how, because they've allowed to just for cannabis to exist amongst the people and as a part of everyday life, how that has also stimulated the economy and helped to normalize it in a safe way, of course, but it's certainly rising the revenues that the state can generate across multiple industries, not just cannabis. Whereas in Maryland, our regulations inhibit us from, I always refer to it as Fight Club, like it exists, but we can't talk about it. And so you just have to wonder if the shackles were taken off and they accepted the will of the people, like what we want, then how many more other industries could be rising with the cannabis tide? Because we want to be a part of the farmers markets. We want to be out at tailgates. We want to do all these things, but we're just not able to. We're not able to at this point.
Wendy, you had mentioned that from the onset, you have operated with descheduling in mind. What are your thoughts on rescheduling and how that might impact the business in the interim?
So a move to Schedule 3, the primary win there is the 280E issue. But I sort of, when I have these conversations, I sort of liken it to, you go to the doctor because there's something wrong and they prescribed you a medication and your initial symptom issue is gone, but now you have side effects from the medication. So, there's a plus and then there's a decent number of potential minuses. I mean, at a strict reading of Schedule 3, that is a drug that is prescribed by a doctor and available in a pharmacy. I think there's many people who believe that the DEA and or the FDA do not have the resources to enforce that, because that's obviously breaks our entire ecosystem. But I also think that there are competing industries that are long established and well capitalized that won't sit around and let us be in a loophole while they are forced to comply with such regulations, whether it's Schedule 3 or something similar that applies to them. And I'm talking about pharma, alcohol, and tobacco. But I also think that it's a great talking point. It's useful from a political standpoint. It clearly could help with 280E and free up cash flow, but it doesn't make us legal. It really only helps a medical product that could be developed and validated. I don't know that the industry at large understands that being regulated under the DEA is like next level compared to dealing with a state regulator. And while they're probably more disciplined and consistent, the DEA, the rigor is going to be much more intense. And more than anything, I think it's just the sort of headline that we need congressional action, right? Because now we're sort of in this like limbo place where we've taken potentially a giant step forward, but we haven't really solved the core issues. So, safer remains a hot topic. And this year seems like it has the most win under its sails that it's had. So, a Schedule 3 and a safer could be a very meaningful change. It very much aligns with a way that we've always looked at the federal conversation, which is incremental. Like we have to get certain wins to like disprove the fears and the myths and like get us the next step forward. But I think it's part of a longer road ahead. I think the ideal scenario is a piece of legislation that's probably closest to what David Joyce of Ohio has put out, which is bipartisan and really kind of cleanly addresses a lot of the the areas of conflict and constraint to normalize state-based operations. Because if we can get rid of 280E, open capital markets, and normalize banking, even without being fully legalized, that fixes a huge amount of the problems. And it also makes every state-based program, particularly from the social equity license standpoint, have much more value and ability to succeed. But those three pieces of the financial constraint is just what's going to hold us back forever.
Of those three pieces, which are you the most optimistic will change first?
Oh, God. I mean, at this moment in time, I guess it's the toss-up between SAFER and Schedule 3, since they both are currently in the balance. And then the outcome of that is, if either one were to move forward, how long will it be until we get there, right? So with Schedule 3, we're going to have a few months of a comment window. I think you're not looking at anything to come to fruition from that until 2025. And, if SAFER passes, how quickly is it enacted? And then let me just put that filter on top of, if an administration doesn't change and undo anything that gets done, there's that as well.
Going back
Sorry,
to...
that's not hopeful at all.
Honestly,
it's she's been in the political game way too long. She knows.
But it's more optimistic than most still. I wanted to go back to the manufacturing a little bit, specifically your infusion methods and your patent pending processes. I understand that you can't give away the secret sauce, but tell us what you can about how you go about infusing products. What makes it special?
Sure. So we use CO2 extraction as the hallmark of all of our products, because it's an FDA form of extraction and it is a clean and palatable way to create the THC distillate that we use to infuse almost everything we make. Specifically with the patented products, we have the first ever US patent for a cannabis sleep aid for our Goodnight product, which is a CBN THC ratio tablet. Wendy was speaking to it earlier, that has 2 pulses. So when you take it about 30 minutes before bedtime, you get 1 pulse of the cannabinoids. And then about 3 hours later, you get a second pulse. And we ran an observational study with patients and a device that sat by the side of their bed that allowed us to track the length of sleep, the quality of their sleep. And so we had real quantitative data to marry with the qualitative data that they shared with us, those participants. And we take all of that to our scientific board, and they weigh in on the statistical significance. And Wendy was making the point earlier that we only will bring products to market that have the integrity of the claims we're trying to make. And so having that scientific board oversight and these observational studies allow us to do that, even though those processes aren't happening inside of the manufacturing facility. I would argue that they're a huge differentiator for us, and they're part of the manufacturing process that enable us to come to market with products that do what we say they're going to do. And the real kind of some of the secrets to the sauce are those scientific board members. So Dr. Ed Rudnick, who chairs our advisory board, holds the patents for Adderall XR. So he, from the jump, understood how you harness, make, and utilize a pulse-release product. And then he took it to different sleep doctors. We have a gastrointestinal line called GI by Curio, and the Comfort tablet has 3 pulses in it. And that was because the gastroenterologist that we worked with said, if you want to create a cannabinoid-based medicine that helps with gut health, it's got to travel a really long way in your system before it actually gets to the target zone. So it can't pulse twice, it has to pulse 3 times, or else you're never going to get those targeted effects, because it just won't have worked for a long enough period of time. So having that scientific background, those scientific minds, is incredibly helpful. And then in terms of like extraction equipment and how we make the products we make on the edible side, when we saw the market for our Curio chews expanding at such a clip, and consistency was one of the things that customers said, I really love how this product tastes, but I also love that a batch I bought in January tastes exactly like the batch I'm buying today in May. we realized that the only way to keep up with the demand was going to be to add automation. So we researched different candy making pieces of equipment that are used worldwide at global scale, and figured out how to take something that wasn't intended for cannabis, but apply it to our processes so that you do have an exact product every single time, that both is faster than having people make every single hand deposit of a chew, but also allows us to come up with new flavors and formulations more quickly, because you basically create like a base for your chew. And then from there, you can make flavors different, you can make potency different, that can be different cannabinoids, but you know that texture and the quality of the chew is going to be the same every time.
Does the current automation and equipment available to your company meet all of your needs, or are there still some gaps that you're looking to fill?
There's still some gaps. I mean, one of the biggest problems is there are companies that make equipment that we would love to be able to use, but they won't sell to us because we're cannabis. So it's almost like the products that we found and the machinery that we found meets our needs right now, but we have an engineering team that's constantly looking at ways to do it better, faster, for less money. A hallmark of our business is that anytime we can lower the cost of production, we will pass that savings on to the end consumer and try and lower the price of our products. And so that's one of the strategic priorities of the engineering team. Like, how can we make products that are as affordable as possible by improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of how we make them? But the biggest challenge, honestly, is finding the companies that meet those needs that won't go, oh, wait, you're cannabis? Sorry, we can't work with you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you have something to add, Wendy?
No, I was going to say that's and then the other side of it is when they're custom made for us. So like one of our original team members, when we started and we used to make pre-rolls in knock boxes, was like beyond irritated by this process and was like, obviously cigarettes are made in mass quantities. Why can't we make pre-rolls this way? And he ended up getting married and moving away. And then, showed back up at our door with his invention of a pre-roll machine, which we helped him perfect when he kind of made his first model. And he has really solved a problem in the industry. But like that was an example where it had to be made for us. Like the chew production was mainstream scaling down for us. This was like coming out of thin air because there's nothing else to use.
Yeah.
What's the pre-roll company?
Accelerant.
Oh,
And the
okay.
machine's called the Pro 2.
Oh, absolutely. He used to work for you?
Uh-huh. He's part of
call
our
him
original
Uncle
group.
Grant.
You call him Uncle Grant?
Yeah. When we were just like a nights and weekends project, he was the project manager and then part of the original team. And then when he got married, he left Maryland because his wife is a doctor and she was in residency.
Huh. Well, I mean, so did you help with the understanding of the model for the equipment as a service model?
We had less to do with his business plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
More to do with he brought his machine in and we said like, sure, we'll use this. And through that endeavor found that there are ways to improve the mechanics of it. And so helped him find a robotics engineer and fine tune some of the ways that it worked. And now it's an incredible machine that has helped us increase our pre-roll business immensely. So it was fantastic that he effectively was like, I'm going to scratch this itch come hell or high water, because it's been a game changer for our pre-roll business.
Well, that is one thing with engineers, I suppose, is that if they know there's a better way, they're going to find it.
Yeah.
I was very intrigued by the use of the scientific advisory board. When did that idea come to fruition and how difficult was it assembling the board?
They've been with us since the beginning. So they were actually in our application. One of the members of the board is a neuroscientist who's been with Hopkins. So we knew him locally. And he brought us Ed, who serves as chair today. And then Dr. David Castaret was on, I think it was Fresh Air on NPR promoting his book Stoned. And that prompted us to reach out to him. And then some of the other physicians and scientists were known either through an agro lens or a healthcare lens. And so we sort of brought this super group together, if you will. We won the sort of pre-approval around, which was called in Maryland in August, I think it was 16th of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our first SAB meeting 60 days later.
And then more recently,
go ahead.
we've added Dr. David Marai from Israel, who runs the cannabinoid research at Technion University, has joined our board, which was a huge compliment both to Ed's leadership and what the SAB members have created, but also a huge win for us because he's one of like modern times foremost cannabinoid researchers, and he's not on any other board in the world. So it's been amazing to learn from him, and he's doing tons of research about CBG and CBC and minor cannabinoids that people are kind of putting in stuff, but they don't really know what it does. And so his feedback on which cannabinoids you should really invest your time and research in versus which, it's like we are still so far from understanding what they will do that it doesn't really give you any value add or credibility to add them into things yet, has been incredibly valuable to the team because it's really helped us focus in on how to use THC, CBD, CBG, THCV, for example, to complement our existing lines as well as innovate and create something new that the country hasn't seen yet.
How often are you interacting with the board?
How often do we interact with them?
Yeah.
So we have quarterly meetings, but depending on what products are in development, there's a scientific advisory board member attached to each product line. So our product innovation team has weekly calls with Dr. Barbara Fivish, for example, who was the dean of the women's school and head of pediatric nephrology at Hopkins for basically the entirety of her career. Like they meet every week. Ed's on a different phone call every week about a different product line. So they take their role very seriously, and we really rely on their counsel and expertise so that anything that we start to invent and or commercialize continues to stay grounded in the science and the data to make sure it has integrity.
When it comes to product development, do you have one in particular that you thought was a slam dunk and didn't make it to market?
Well, there were two versions of the Good Night tablet when we went through the PI process. So WB, do you want to speak to that evolution because you were running that?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that one is that there were the two models that were tested one was fully cannabinoid based and the other one used a supplement called L-theanine, which people sometimes take for mind quieting properties. And it's so common in our space for people to be like, I'm going to put this thing in and like, I'm going to take THC and melatonin and now it's a sleep gummy, right? And so we actually trialed this concept where we had the formulations of THC and CBN and the pulse, and we had it with and without the L-theanine, which we thought was going to be an interesting additive. And it was actually better when it wasn't there. We had better results. And so I think that's always for me, like the pain point is like, there are so many products out there that use like some sort of buzzword and people fall for it. And it's like, oh, put this in here and with this and we'll call it that. And then it's like, oh yeah, that'll change my mood. That'll make me sleep. That'll whatever. And so, except when we do it, like we prove it out. Like we're not putting it out there unless like the trial group said it and validated it. And we can stand behind it and make it in a repeatable way.
I think one other interesting learning was when we came out with our GI line for gut health, our assumption was that if you're going through cancer treatment, you would want an anti-nausea pill. Anything anti-nausea was going to be really important to you. So we met with the nurses at the Greenebaum Cancer Center at University of Maryland. And shockingly, they were like, no, we have Zofran. It works. we don't need to fix it. Like, that is good. What we need is for people who won't take a pill, what we can offer them for anti-nausea. So our Soothe vape and our Soothe tincture, which were never in the original product architecture, came to pass because the experts that live the day-to-day life with patients and are constantly recommending alternatives to them were like, this is what this group of people needs. So the consumer research side of the process is really more informative, frankly, sometimes, than like the trialing or like what didn't actually make it to market, because we don't even get to that part. We're told so early on, like, no, don't waste your time with that. But if you can come up with this, then that could be a game changer.
You mentioned a super group when it came to the advisory board. Now, would you say the same about the family? And what's it like being a family-run business?
It's fun. I always joke with people who will comment on our dad and like his work ethic. And there's like, and we've achieved a lot. Like, we have to stop and remind ourselves that it's 2024. We've been doing this for 7 years. Wendy and Michael have been at it for close to 9 from the inception. And just the volume of products we've come out with, businesses we've built, teams we've grown, locations as we've stood up, like, it is a lot of work in a short period of time. And I always joke, well, like, the best kept secret is if you hire your friends and your family, they work for you 7 days a week. So we get the benefit of Saturdays and Sundays of being productive. But it's super enjoyable for me and Wendy, and our brother David is our general counsel. He joined us, gosh, was it 3 years ago at this point?
I would say like 2+, yeah.
I don't know. He'll probably kill us for not knowing how long he's been there. But
I think November's 3.
It's super fun because we have always been a close family. And so it's been nice to have even more reasons to talk to each other every day. But I also think it's kind of comical at times for the people we work with, because we can have like really heated exchanges during the workday in like a conference room. And then we'll get off the phone call and people will be like, oh my God, that was intense. And then I'll just call Wendy. I'll be like, so what are you making for dinner tonight? Like, what's happening with like my niece or nephew? And they're like, we don't understand how you turn it on and turn it off. And it's really because we're all about the business when we're about the business. And then otherwise, like, you're still my sister. I think our mom is probably the one who struggles with it the most, because she doesn't work in the business. And she's just like, do you guys know how to talk about anything else? We're like, no, sorry.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard about with MSOs is the difficulty managing in multiple states, because you're essentially running 2 small businesses. Is it the same? Do you feel the same way when it comes to Curio? Or do you feel like there's a little bit of MSO over the top that helps kind of make things a little bit more efficient?
I think having the structure that the cGMP provides has made it easier to go into a second state. I think the biggest challenge is constantly reminding everybody from the C-suite to the director level to managers that we now have this other group of individuals in Missouri that we don't see every day, but they're out there doing exactly the same thing. So we've evolved our culture of how to be multi-state, and finding really the things that make Missouri special and trying to bring those into Maryland. So like our HR manager, Libby, created this unbelievable onboarding program that she calls Space Camp in Missouri. And we've since adopted Space Camp in Maryland because it's really impressive, really well organized, and really effective at bringing people into the company and the culture and understanding the importance of our SOPs. So in that way, having that second state has allowed us to improve our first one. But I think it's just kind of like any good athlete continues to train and to practice. And so with every new market you bring in, you just kind of have to keep practicing. Like, it's not just Maryland and Missouri, it's Maryland, Missouri, and X. And the more you live that and breathe it, the more natural it becomes to be mindful of your entire organization and not the one you're just with every single day.
So which state is X? Which state is next for Curio?
I don't think we can share that.
I would say, yeah, I mean, I think, based on what I was sharing before, it's most of where we consider it, I would geographically kind of call it like east of the Mississippi, right? Because those the states on this side of the country tend to have a more limited license structure. Kind of they've established a reasonable product mix. Their regulatory environments seem conducive to the investment. We've looked at Florida for years because they flirt with adding more licenses, but it never comes to fruition. Now there's the chatter of it going adult use. I think that's a very interesting place. Ohio's going to change soon. Pennsylvania's next to us. They remain medical and probably farther out to an adult use change to the other two. Those are three that kind of sit on the edges of change. Like we have a store that's in the northern part of Maryland, a dispensary, and we get a lot of traffic from Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania because each one of those states kind of doesn't have it totally together yet. And so it's driving people to Maryland where the product mix is prolific and the prices are better, whether you're medical, no adult use, both, something else going on. And so it really, I think, is a little bit of a waiting game to see where states fall out in their regulatory schemes overall.
When do you think the U.S. goes federally legal?
I think 2028 would be nice.
Yeah. No, that's like the quickest, most succinct answer I've ever had to that. No, it was fantastic.
I don't know if we'll get there that quickly, but I think if the will is there. I mean, like when we started this in 2014, I went to NCIA convention in Denver as like reconnaissance to bring back information. And I sat in a panel that was about regulatory schemes and states and things like that. And they said then that their outlook was based on kind of percentage of legality in the state that would be the catalyst for the federal government to act. Now, I think back then, there was a little bit more aspirational because it was sort of through this lens of like, well, this is an experiment that they're going to let the states try. And then once they kind of figure out that they've gotten it right, they'll jump in. Now, I don't know if everyone's like really on board with it in that way, but I think that it can't be ignored. We were talking about the job creation. There's clearly economic drivers. I mean, our comptroller does a report every quarter that shows you where the tax dollars are coming through regionally and the volume of them. And Ohio took it across the country in terms of the percentage of people who are in a legal market. So I think even more so, the more red states that shift change the game. I think if we wanted to have a legal medical state, we could achieve that very quickly because I think you can catch a lot of congressional flies with that honey. It's the adult use that makes it harder. And I think if Congress can actually forge a path of two bills, one that deals with the structural needs that have to do with operations and finance, and one that deals with righting wrongs of the past through social justice elements. If they're two different bills that find a path, I think that's also because in the lack of bipartisanship exists in kind of using one lever to draw on another. But that's very practical, and things don't get passed on a good day, and we're cannabis, so.
Well, I thank you both very much for taking the time. I really do appreciate the insight, and it's encouraging to hear about what's going on at Curio. But before we get out of here, Rebecca, I'll start with you. Is there anything else that you want to share or make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or Curio Wellness?
Sure. I mean, I'm not that important, so nothing about but I would encourage everybody, if you are in Maryland or if you're in Missouri, to please go into your local dispensary and try a Curio Wellness product or one of our partners like Caviar Fused or Flower by Edie Parker or Dixie in Maryland. They're all companies run by great people. And at the end of the day, we want to bring safe, effective, and reliable products to Americans. and through our partner brands as well. We want everybody to have a really great life and use cannabis to get there. So thank you for listening, and we hope we were informative and inspirational.
What's the best, in your opinion, Rebecca, what's the best product Curio is making right now?
Oh, our THCV Good Day Chews. I used one on Saturday, and it has about a 4 to 5 hour duration. It only has 1 milligram of THC. So it's 1 milligram THC, 1 milligram CBD, 4 milligrams of THCV. And I cleaned my kitchen. I baked, and I was so productive, but I was not like jittery or vibrating or super chatty. I was just in the zone. And you don't have any type of hangover or headache after using any of our products. So like, I personally really don't drink alcohol anymore because I either have a THCV gummy by day or a mango 5 milligram sativa terpene chew by night. And I'm still able to like take care of my kids and get stuff done the next day. So those would be my recommendations.
Truly made it a good day.
Yes, exactly.
Wendy, again, thank you very much for your time. Anything else that you'd like to share with the CEN audience?
Gosh, I think Rebecca might have said it all there. She got me thinking about products, and I was going to say that Terp Chew because I think they're sort of underrated and misunderstood in the fact that so many products claim like sativa indica hybrid, particularly in an edible, but that doesn't show up in the lab results, and that's something we figured out. So that effect can come every time you take it, and I think it's pretty amazing. And I probably have to plug the O products because I think we might be one of the only brands with a truly arousing, Rebecca's trying to show you behind her, a truly arousing and Viagra-like cannabis product that's on the market.
The O product. That's the name.
You want that name? It's called OH. It's a vape, flower vape, edible chew, and actually an intimacy oil. So a lubricant of sorts.
Yeah, that's just for the, listeners to know. Make sure they get the facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have a good day and a great night.
Very good. Very good. Well, again, thank you both for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email, the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Wendy Bronfine and Rebecca Bronfine Raphael, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we'll see you next week.